Inauguration Day, January 20th. Watch it with us. Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and Jeremy Boring. Live from D.C., Donald Trump's historic second term officially begins. Coverage starts at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Watch live on DailyWire Plus.
Today, the Matt Walsh Show is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality obsolete? Is it insulting and out of touch to tell young people to go work fast food and work their way up in the world? That's the growing consensus among some commentators on the right, and we'll talk about it. Also, Joe Biden speaks to the country for the final time, thank God. Pro-lifers who've been imprisoned by the Biden administration call on Trump for a pardon. And former comedian Bill Burr slams the people who've dared to criticize California's response to the wildfires. What the hell happened to this guy? When did he become such a pathetic little dork? We'll talk about all that and more today on The Matt Walsh Show. That's right, we're going to D.C. Watch the Daily Wire live as Donald Trump is sworn in as the 47th president. Celebrate with 47% off your Daily Wire Plus membership. Use code 47 at dailywire.com/subscribe and join us in making history. Being a husband, father, and host of my own show means life never slows down. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. Sounds miserable and time-consuming. But with Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a better or more convenient dietary supplement to ensure that you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables every day with 31 different whole fruit and vegetable ingredients. Balance of Nature takes fruits and veggies, freeze dries them, turns them into a powder, and then puts them in a capsule. You take your fruit and veggie capsule every day, and then your body knows what to do with them. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Walsh for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Walsh. If you aren't on X or Twitter, if you insist on dead naming it, you bigot, you will often be surprised to learn about the kinds of things people are arguing about on that platform. In many cases, the debates don't resemble anything that anyone outside of the site is talking about. These debates are often insular, parochial. Groups of people will get into heated disputes that last sometimes for weeks or months or longer, and yet which have no relevance beyond the confines of the platform itself. So I'll give you just one example of millions. Among right-wingers on X, there has been a long-running and quite tedious quarrel over the term woke right. Various groups of conservatives are accusing each other of being woke right as they debate what the term means and whether it describes anything real. Now, I don't know where this woke right idea comes from, but I do know that I've never heard a single soul in the three-dimensional physical world ever use the phrase or express any opinion about it one way or another. Yet there are relatively prominent conservatives on X who have spent months locked in combat over a concept that has no real political or cultural relevance at all. Nobody cares about it but them. Needless to say, there are a great many examples of this sort of thing, and even less do I need to say that I have myself been guilty of arguing about things on X that nobody outside of the app cares about. I might even sometimes be the one starting the arguments, admittedly. However, not every debate on X is so trivial. Sometimes the conversation is relevant beyond social media. Sometimes it reflects what's actually happening in the world, and sometimes, more often now in the Elon era, a debate on the platform is actually important. And this week, there's been one of those kinds of arguments, another round of it anyway, as this has been a long-running dispute. It's important enough to talk about here, and it'll lead me to a very crucial point that I want to make, especially for the younger people who are listening. The debate revolves around the economic situation that young people in particular are facing. One side of the argument says that although it is a challenging landscape for young people who are just starting out in the world, the best thing they can do is get an entry-level job somewhere and work their way up in the world from that starting point. The other side says that this kind of bootstraps mentality is obsolete. Young people have been totally screwed. They can't get a job and work their way up. And they say telling a young person to go work some low-paying customer service job is insulting and out of touch. The game is rigged. American jobs are being stolen en masse by foreigners. the American dream, says this side of the debate, is effectively dead. And therefore, the old school kind of go out there and work your way up the ladder approach is simply too antiquated to be useful, they would say. Now, as you already guessed, out of the two camps, I tend to fall more into the former. Although the latter camp isn't wrong about many of the fundamental points they're making about the system as it's currently constructed. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's take a look at how this exchange is playing out. And I think that the debate may be best encapsulated by this. Chris Rufo, in a series of tweets a couple of days ago, wrote something that has really provoked people and caused a lot of consternation and anger on the other side of this argument. Here's what he wrote. Every generation has challenges. We currently have huge problems with the cost of housing and splintering culture, but the economy is strong. Incomes have never been higher. Trades are hiring apprentices straight out of high school, and tech has enabled a wave of entrepreneurship and high-income email jobs from anywhere on earth. We should remember that the boomers, whatever their faults, had to make their way in a much poorer America and had to navigate war, stagflation, recession, and high interest rates. It's never a cakewalk. We should work to provide opportunity for our kids, but should also remind them to be grateful for the opportunities they have. I didn't make $50,000 a year or own a car until I was 30. Then after years of struggle in a creative field, things paid off. I could live in Seattle or New York or DC, but I choose to live in a small town. It's all a trade-off, and one can make a good life in almost any metro area in the US. Now, in a follow-up, this is a thing that really set some people off. He posted a job listing from Panda Express, and he wrote this. This is basically full employment. The Panda Express near my house is offering $70,000 a year plus benefits for the assistant manager. You can make $100,000 a year at Chipotle for a few years and working up to store manager. Now, as I said, this set a lot of people off. They're very upset by especially the Panda Express, the suggestion by Chris Rufo that Panda Express may be a viable option for young adults, starting out in the world. This is very offensive to a lot of people on X. A prominent account that goes by the handle Bronze Age Pervert responded in a way that I think kind of captures the general attitude of the other side of this argument. He wrote, "This is an absurd thing to post. This environment is the worst in decades and maybe ever in America to build wealth through any normal career. It's the worst work environment and worst prospects for wealth accumulation ever. For a young person, it's next to impossible, in fact, even with the best degrees and an elite job. It's absurd and a joke to see conservative pundits who work as writers and commentators in media and aren't frankly exemplars of Protestant capitalist enterprise recommend working at Chipotle and UPS for a few smart young right-wing men who are deploring decades-long trends. Maybe you'll care to also give them advice on manning up and marrying a local sweet girl/high school sweetheart." Now, the debate spiraled from there. A writer named Aaron McIntyre agrees with Bronze Age Pervert. He posted, "If you're worried about Andrew Tate's influence on young men, telling them to climb the fast food ladder probably isn't the move." Another commentator named Scott Greer chimes in with a similar sentiment. "Conservatives wonder why young men turn to Andrew Tate when they tell the same demographic to be content with fast food work and marrying much older single moms." Now, someone else gave his perspective. He said that it is possible for a young person to get started and succeed even in this tough environment. He offered the example of his own 22-year-old son, who he said has a job at UPS making $70,000 a year at 22 years old. He said he's about to marry his girlfriend, who he said is 10 years older. And to that, someone else in a post that has 27,000 likes said, "Poor kid is grinding, about to marry a 32-year-old living in his dad's basement, stuck in a dead-end job for $70,000 a year. He'll likely never have kids or own a home. Imagine how out of touch you have to be to post this proudly. This is losing, but boomer dad imagines everything is okay." A 22-year-old getting a $70,000 a year is losing and is doomed to never own a home. That's the idea. Now, Mike Cernovich is on the other side, what we might call the bootstraps camp. And he thinks, and so do I, that work is not supposed to be fun all the time. It's not even necessarily going to be fulfilling. You'd like for it to be, but it won't necessarily be. But you have to do it because that's life and always has been. He wrote, quote, "You're supposed to hate your job. That's why it's a job. Someone pays you because they don't want to do it. Most of us had jobs. It's nothing special. You're not a snowflake. Fight Club and Office Space covered this decades ago. Work sucks. This isn't new." But it's this reply to that post that I think best captures kind of the essence and what I think is the fatal flaw in the, I guess, anti-bootstraps position. Somebody responded and said, the reason why jobs were worth it is that you could afford a home in a nice, high-trust society and support a family. Why do it now? I will not be reduced to an effing serf. Jobs are not worth it, he says. Jobs make you a serf. And this is why I think there's value in talking about this, what may seem like very online controversy, but it's not just online. It seems clear to me that a lot of demoralized young people feel exactly this way. They think jobs aren't worth it. I mean, I hear this kind of thing a lot. So there's no point in even trying, they think. They have it harder than anyone has ever had it. It's hopeless. Everything's unfair, and so on and so on. And these young people are being encouraged down this hopeless road by people who are considered intellectuals on the right, like Bronze Age pervert, who we recall said that today's work environment is the worst ever in history, and that it's next to impossible to become successful and accumulate wealth. This is what they're being told. They're being told by these supposed thought leaders that they should ignore anyone who even suggests that they start off in a low-paying job working customer service or something similar. And again, a lot of young people, especially young men, have heeded this advice, I think, to their own detriment. So here's what I want to say after this very long preamble where I unfortunately had to give you a bit of a blow-by-blow account of a Twitter war. I acknowledge that young people face serious challenges starting out in the workforce. I can clearly see and do not deny that it is harder than it should be for a young man to get into a stable career, buy a house, start a family, and all of that. I agree that we are importing foreigners to take American jobs. That is hideously evil and unfair. I'm in favor of any policy that puts an end to that scam. So I agree with the anti-bootstrappers on that point. They're going to hear no argument from me. Okay. Once we've agreed on that, what then? What is a young adult supposed to actually do tomorrow? See, this is the question that matters. It's the question that in these kinds of conversations, most people just skip. You know, it reminds me of my frequent debates with the Red Pillars and Manosphere, where they declare that, you know, the dating scene is a disaster and young men have no hope of meeting a quality woman and building a stable family. Marriages are broken. It's all broken. It doesn't work. Well, my question to them is always the same. What do you want these young men to do then? What do you want them to actually do with their lives? Give up and die alone? Is that it? What do you want them to do? And I ask that here as well. What should they do tomorrow? I'm not asking what the president should do, or what Congress should do, or what government agencies should do. I'm asking what the actual individual human being we're talking about here, the newly minted young adult, should do. He will wake up in the morning and brush his teeth and eat breakfast, and then what? That young man who is 22 years old and has no job, if you believe it is deeply insulting to suggest that he should go apply at Panda Express or UPS, what do you want him to do instead? What do you recommend? What is your plan? Complaining about it incessantly on Twitter is not a plan. Talking about how it should be and used to be is not a plan. Calling for policy solutions is fine, and I agree that we should work on those. Yeah. But what about tomorrow? What is the demoralized young person supposed to actually do in his life tomorrow? Because it seems to me that anyone who makes any kind of practical suggestion of what he could actually do in his own life individually tomorrow is shouted down by this other side. So what I'm asking, what's he supposed to do? Don't deflect. Don't tell me about the H-1B program. I think we should abolish it. I don't want to import any foreign labor at all. Okay? But a young man who wakes up in the morning tomorrow cannot abolish the H-1B program. That's not something that he can accomplish tomorrow. So what should he do? Should he post about abolishing it? Okay, fine. That takes about 60 seconds. Let's give him 30 minutes for a series of tweets about H-1B visas. Great. What's next? How is he spending the rest of his day? And if you have no answer to that question, then your contribution to this discussion is worthless. You have nothing of value to offer this young man. Now, here's what I say. I say that he must get up onto his feet in spite of it all and begin to pursue his goals one small step at a time. He must get the best job he possibly can, which will almost certainly not be very good or very fun. But he's not in a position right now at 21, 22 years old where he can afford to worry about what is fun. He has to work as hard as he can to achieve what he can right now. He has to gain experience and establish himself. And if he's just starting out in the world, the best job is probably whatever job he can get, because you have to start somewhere. And a job is better than no job. He has a difficult road. Every young man in his position through the entire history of the earth has had a difficult road. Life itself is a difficult road. Is his road more difficult than the road that, say, young men of my generation had to walk? Perhaps. I mean, I entered adult life right around the time of a Great Recession and a housing market collapse. It wasn't exactly, an easy path. I worked many awful customer service jobs that I hated with every fiber of my being. And my hatred of them fueled me even more. I was more determined to become successful so that I would never again have to work the kind of job where you wear a name tag and get paid by the hour. But I had to work those jobs in order to get to a point where I didn't have to work those jobs. Because you have to start somewhere. And that's how it goes. So I'm not recommending that anyone do anything that I have not already done. Is it harder now? Maybe. Is it harder than it was for the boomers when they were just starting out? Probably, although I think the comparison is overstated. Is it the hardest ever? Is a young person in America today facing next to impossible odds and unprecedented historic hardship? Of course not. That is an absurd suggestion. If you are a 22-year-old man today, you may have it a bit harder than some in your parents' and grandparents' generation, but that is as far as it could even theoretically go. World history did not begin in 1955. No matter what, you and I and our parents all had it and have it easier than the vast majority of humans who have ever existed on the planet. We are all of us, every person listening to me right now, myself included, we are all in the top 1% of easiest lives ever lived by human beings. Which is why, even with all of our problems, you would not want to live anywhere else on the planet today. And I know that because you're not. You're here. And if you had a time machine, the farthest you might want to go back is the middle of the 20th century and no farther. And if you did go back even that far, you would almost certainly discover that it was not the cakewalk you imagined it would be. None of this diminishes the difficulties that you as a young person are currently experiencing. Okay? I only mean to put it in context. And the context is important. Here's why it's important. Because if you think that nobody has ever had it harder than you, you may then be justified in wondering whether success is simply impossible in your case. After all, no one has ever succeeded against odds so great as what you're facing. But that's why it's important to realize that many millions of people, millions, hundreds of millions, have succeeded against odds many times greater than anything you have ever faced. That should inspire you, not offend you. The point is not to be dismissive. That's an inspirational point. And either way, my message to the young man that we're talking about here is that he still has to get up and walk, even if he did have the hardest life anyone has ever lived on this or any planet. Still, I would say, well then, get up and move forward. What else are you going to do? Lie down and die? Now, my attitude is condemned by some right-wingers whose doomerism has now descended to a point where they will call you a traitor for suggesting that a young man has any agency at all in his life because they want to hear and dispense nothing but misery porn and hopelessness. Anything else makes you a boomer cuck. And that's because these people, who also, by the way, many people were talking about, they're all also like commentators and pundits, while they speak with such contempt of the con-ink pundits. Like all of them are also that, by the way, you know? But they don't actually give the slightest damn about the young people that they pretend to be speaking for. And I know that because all they offer is just relentless hopelessness. So instead, we end up with the solution, which I've seen repeated in different forms countless times, offered by the commenter I mentioned earlier, that jobs aren't worth it, he says, because he's not going to be a serf. So instead, he will presumably live off of the government or his parents. But here's the problem. That's not how you escape being a serf. That's how you become one. You are volunteering for a life of failure and servitude. Working at Panda Express is beneath you, but to eat it for lunch using your dad's credit card because you refuse to support yourself is not beneath you? Who do you think is in the higher position there? You think you're in a position where you can look down on the Panda Express manager? When you're the one there eating lunch that your daddy is paying for? It makes no sense. So again, I ask, what is your plan? What are you going to do tomorrow? Some people like to mock the bootstraps mentality, but they have given young people precisely zero alternatives. They have not given them any idea of what they should actually do tomorrow. And to me, that is the most important and most useful question here. What should you do tomorrow? My answer is simple. Tomorrow, you get up and you put on your shoes and you get started. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Let's talk about something that affects all of us, those of us who are responsible, hardworking Americans, and that is taxes. Now it's the new year and tax season is upon us. Are you prepared for what's coming? Do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you miss the deadline to file for an extension? Well, with the new year beginning and heading into the busy tax season, the IRS may be ramping up enforcement. Let me tell you, they're not playing around. You could face wage garnishments, frozen bank accounts, or even property seizures if you haven't taken action. But here's the good news. There's still hope. Tax Network USA has been in this game for years, and they know exactly how to navigate the complex world of tax law. They've helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt and have filed over 10,000 tax returns. That's billion with a B, everybody. They specialize in helping hardworking Americans like you reduce their tax burden. And I get it. Dealing with the IRS is about as fun as a root canal. But, ignoring the problem is not going to make it go away. So here's what you got to do. For a complimentary consultation, call today at 1-800-958-1000 or visit their website at tnusa.com/Walsh. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh today. Don't let the IRS take advantage of you. Get the help you need with Tax Network USA. Joe Biden delivered his address to the nation last night. Not much noteworthy there. Honestly, I could barely muster to even talk about the guy at this point. It's I'm ready for him to be gone, and mercifully, he will be very shortly. I do want to play this one clip from the 20 or so minute speech. Listen to this.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy. They just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes.
You know, it's really sad. I mean, everything about this guy is sad, but he has now given 2 addresses since dropping out of the race. And the first was announcing that he was dropping out. And then there's this one, his farewell address. So that's 2 addresses where you have the opportunity to deliver something historic and to deliver an address that would be remembered by history. Because these are 2 historic moments. This does not happen very often. One where you have a president announcing that he's not going to run his first, second term, and then finally stepping away. So these are opportunities to give a historic speech, and in the kind of spot where in history we know that presidents in the past have given historic speeches and said things that are remembered. And yet, in both cases, we get this just boring. It's not even like, it doesn't make you angry because it's so dishonest and so partisan, although it is both of those things. It's mostly just boring. It's boring, bland, not really saying anything, certainly not saying anything of any importance, and not saying it well, obviously. And you can't, I mean, even in this moment, when you got nothing to lose, you know, it's not like you have to calculate your rhetoric because you're going to be in political office or you're running for office. You're stepping away. You're done. So this is a time when you can just throw caution to the wind and be real and be, you know, just speak the truth and say something insightful, and we can't get that from him. So he says you got to watch out for the ultra-wealthy oligarchy. The oligarchy is bad, says Joe Biden. Now keep in mind that Joe Biden is the guy who just last week awarded a Medal of Freedom to George Soros. And a few weeks before that, gave his own son a free pass for any and all federal crimes committed over the course of a decade. And now he wants you to know that oligarchies are bad. And that's because, as we know, what he forgot to mention the point that his opposition to oligarchies does not apply to the good kind of oligarchy, which is the kind run by people that Joe Biden agrees with, people such as Joe Biden himself. Which is why this the demonizing of the wealthy, this kind of class warfare rhetoric, it falls so flat at this point. It falls so flat because it's coming from people. I mean, again, you just gave a Medal of Freedom to George Soros. You cannot be a friend and admirer of George Soros and also be worried about and opposed to oligarchies. That's just, it's not possible. Daily Wire has this: pro-life Americans unjustly imprisoned by President Joe Biden's Justice Department are formally appealing to Donald Trump for pardons. The Daily Wire is reporting the petitions for pardons of the 21 pro-life advocates sent Wednesday to Trump by the Thomas More Society, pro-life firm that represents the defendants. Thomas More Society wrote, these peaceful pro-life Americans mistreated by Biden include grandparents, pastors, a Holocaust survivor, a Catholic priest. All are selfless, sincere patriots. Their respective plights and personal information are provided in attachments to the letter. And so they're calling on the pardon. And this should be a day one priority for Trump. In fact, you know, the inauguration is 4 days before the March for Life. So I'll be in town for both. I'll be in D.C. for both. We're going to be in for the inauguration, and we're going to stay through to attend the march. And this would be a great way to commemorate the March for Life. Imagine if Trump announced on the day of the march that he was giving pardons to all of the pro-lifers unjustly persecuted. You know, that would be spectacular. And, you know, whether that's the timing or not, this is the kind of thing, and I think he'll do it. I hope he'll do it, but this should just be immediate. Like, there's no reason to wait. And you've got, especially when you have these pro-lifers who are currently in federal prison, all thanks to the some of the most blatant political targeting and political persecution we've ever seen. You know, and when we think about Joe Biden targeting his political opponents and engaging in political persecution, I mean, the first example that comes to mind, of course, is Trump is trying to throw his own political opponent in jail. And then you think about the January 6ers. And those are certainly two examples of political persecution. But I think that what's happened, there's no point in like ranking it, but I think what's happened to these pro-lifers is the worst of all. I mean, all these cases are bad. I think that this is the worst. I think that this is the most egregious, the worst, the most evil of all is what he's done to these pro-lifers, because these are, we are literally talking about, in many cases, elderly women praying. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. I mean, that's why they're going to prison. And which is also why, after the pardons are given out, the next step is to repeal the FACE Act, which is the federal law. The FACE Act is the federal law, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, that was used as a pretense for going after and prosecuting these pro-lifers. And so that needs to be the next step. And that's something that Congress needs to take on, is that needs to be repealed. That can't exist anymore. It's a law that, you know, as we've mentioned before, allegedly it's supposed to also, even though it says access to clinics, it's also supposed to protect pregnancy resource centers, pro-life centers. They are also supposed to be protected in the exact same way. But that has not happened. It has not been used that way. Never has been, certainly wasn't by the Biden administration. So this is blatantly unconstitutional. You know, equality under the law, equal treatment under the law is one of the most basic constitutional principles, and it has been violated by the Biden administration egregiously. Daily Mail has this: a Republican congresswoman is set to reintroduce a set of bills that will impose the death penalty on those convicted of sex crimes against children. Staunch Donald Trump ally Representative Anna Paulina Luna first introduced two of the bills during last year's Congress, but neither of them succeeded in gaining traction. And now she's introducing them again. She's told Fox News Digital, if you're raping someone, if you're molesting someone, and you're essentially murdering their soul, those people never actually recover. I've sent a committee with a very prominent female House Democrat who actually talked about the fact that she was molested as a child. And so you can see that it impacts and really hurts people. The Holding Child Predators Accountable Act mandates the death penalty for or life imprisonment for anyone found guilty of producing, distributing, or possessing child pornography. And then there's also the No Repeat Child Sex Offenders Act, was a more broad bill that likewise would have forced judges to impose death or life in prison for people convicted of child sex trafficking. So I obviously support this. It's a no-brainer. Death penalty for child molesters and child pornographers, both the distributors and the consumers of it. is obvious. And, the idea that only those who commit physical murder should be eligible for the death penalty is at best arbitrary. There are things worse than, or at least as bad as murder, and abusing a child in this way is one of them. And if anything, in fact, you could make an argument that these people, like, if anything, the argument would be that we only give the death penalty to child predators. I mean, that's not my argument, because I think that there's a lot more people who are deserving of it. But I would sooner accept the argument, that argument, than the reverse, the idea that these scumbags should be specially exempt. I mean, after all, the crime that they've committed is particularly heinous, and they are particularly unlikely to ever be reformed. We can certainly never trust them in society again. We can't trust that they've been reformed. These people who cannot be trusted in society. And keeping them in prison for life, and this to me is one of the maybe the most crucial argument that I don't see mentioned as often, but keeping them in prison for life, or for any amount of time, requires extra effort. It requires extra expense, because they have to be protected from the other prisoners. And I think that is also unjust, to force the taxpayers to pay to protect these people. That's another reason to execute them, because the only other option, if you're going to put them in prison, is you can't just put them in prison. They have to get special treatment, special protection. I mean, you could throw them out in general population, but that's the same thing as a death sentence. So at that point, you may as well just give them a death sentence and carry it out legally, rather than pawning it off to the other prisoners to take care of. So I think that's a point to it. And one other point is that these crimes are especially easy to prove now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because these child predators, most of the time, leave a very unmistakable digital trail. You arrest the child predator and find 900 hours of material on the computer or whatever. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. So the only kind of reasonable argument against the death penalty, whether it's for child predators or anybody else, is just the fear that you'll execute someone who is not actually guilty of the crime that they were convicted of. Execute an innocent person. But I think in particular these days, but really with any crime, that is much less of a concern than it was 50 years ago. Because DNA evidence, there's cameras everywhere, cell phone data. I mean, there's so much that you can use to prove. And especially when you got someone who's one of these scumbags. It's almost always, there's an unmistakable a trail that they leave behind. Let's see, there's an article in Breitbart about Netflix that, according to the article, Netflix is not joining the sort of anti-woke bandwagon. Netflix's response to President-elect Donald Trump's re-election victory is the scheduled premiere of a documentary on Duchess of Sussex Meghan Markle, a symbol of Hollywood wokeism. Netflix, a streaming service giant that openly works with the Obamas, does not appear to be willing to shift its left-leaning corporate scope following Trump's re-election, as did Meta and Amazon. With Netflix's earnings call set for the end of January, its investor relations team refused to respond when Breitbart News requested comment about whether it plans to defund DEI programs, publish content more friendly to President Trump, or distance itself from the Obamas. So while there is this shift that we're seeing, Facebook, Jeff Bezos, these apparent shifts away from ultra wokeism, it appears that Netflix is not joining that. Now, which maybe they're not, but I will say, and this was really just my segue into mentioning this show, I will say that Netflix has a new Western miniseries out called American Primeval that I hadn't seen any advertisements for it. I mean, maybe they're out there. They didn't cross my path. I hadn't seen anything about this show, and then I think I just saw it pop up on Netflix. And yeah, it's a Western miniseries. And so far, watching with my wife, we're 2 or 3 episodes in, I will say it's shockingly unwoke so far. And I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch. So I can't, this isn't quite a recommendation because I haven't seen the whole thing yet. It's possible that this thing goes off the rails. It's possible that this is all leading to some kind of uber PC conclusion. I mean, there was that show, one of the more recent Western miniseries, 1883, came out a few years ago and started really strong, a very strong start. I liked the first 1 or 2 episodes. And then by the end, it's just PC trope after PC. It becomes a PC soap opera by the end. It's terrible. It goes from, I don't think I've ever seen a show that plunges so quickly from pretty good to just unwatchable tripe as that show does. So maybe that happens here. I don't know. But so far, I can tell you that this show, this Western, the Indians are portrayed as generally warlike and ruthless, which is accurate, but just not how Indians are ever portrayed in Westerns these days. So this is not a simple white man bad, Indian good type of thing. The lead character in the film, the protagonist, is a woman, but she's not this kind of like kick-ass Mary Sue type, you know, who can knock down a guy and knock him flat with one punch to the face, can shoot a guy square between the eyes from 50 yards. Like, not that. She's actually pretty incompetent, has to be bailed out by the lead male character constantly, which actually gets a little bit annoying as a kind of narrative. It becomes a narrative device of this woman just doing dumb crap constantly and then having to get bailed out. So that does get a little annoying, but they've avoided the PC tropes so far almost entirely, which is very impressive. So I will say that. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think there's 6 episodes, so we'll see where it leads. It's also a good story. It's about a mother and her son attempting to make their way west to meet her husband, and they end up linking up with this kind of mysterious drifter guy. Classic Western archetype. You got to have that guy, and you got to have the mysterious drifter. And he becomes their kind of protector on the journey. And along the way, they wind up kind of in the crossfire of a 3-way battle between the U.S. Army, Indians, and Mormon settlers in the Utah Territory. Very interesting. I will say that it's not kind to Mormons so far. It is Mormons are the villains of the Brigham Young is the villain of the story so far. So if you're Mormon, you probably will find that pretty annoying. It's a bit heavy-handed with the brutality and violence. It's rather relentless. But if you've read the book Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, it'll kind of remind you of that. It's not based on that book. The story is not the same. But I would say it's in the spirit of that book. It reminds me, if you tried to make Blood Meridian as a movie, which I think it's probably unfilmable, although I think it's a great book, but it would look something like this. And I happen to love Cormac McCarthy, so to me that's a selling point. So there's your semi-recommendation for the day. Let's get to the comment section.
If you're a man, it's required that you grow a beard. Hey, we're the Sweet Baby Gang.
Matt, you said you have a lot of events on Inauguration Weekend. You do realize it's the divisional round, don't you? What kind of football fan are you? Oh, I know. Believe me. Yes, the Ravens are playing Sunday night. Ravens-Bills. Might be the greatest playoff game in history. In history, okay? This might be the greatest playoff game ever. Highly anticipated. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, the 2 MVP candidates. It's going to be 9 degrees in Buffalo. And I'm going to be otherwise occupied. I got stuff going on, events to attend, which again, very honored to be invited. I don't mean to be ungrateful about it. There's a ball, there's like a pre-inauguration ball that night, right in the middle of the game. But it's also Ravens-Bills. I can't. So we're going to have to figure this out. I told my wife that this is a situation that we're in. Now, because they didn't announce. We didn't know we started filling up the schedule for inauguration weekend. They didn't announce the NFL schedule until just this past Sunday night. And so we're gonna have to figure that out. I've already been checking what are the bars around where the ball is happening. My wife said, "Are we really gonna leave a ball in our black tie formal attire and go to a sports bar?" Yeah. I mean, put on your ball gown, honey. We're going to Buffalo Wild Wings. Is where we're going. Because I can't miss the game. This priorities in life. Okay, this inauguration is historic. It's historic, but also it's Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. That is also historic. So we'll figure this thing out. We'll get through it. I know we will. Somehow, some way. All right. As a veteran, I can confirm there is nothing but the cleanest and most non-offensive language in the military. That's what I thought. That's why whenever I'm around someone who's in the military or former military, the spiciest language I've ever heard is maybe something like "geez Louise" or "dag nabbit." And even that, I thought, was a little too PG-13 for my taste. So I can see why those Democrat senators at the hearing with Pete Hegseth were so offended by his reported bad language. Good grief, Matt. 60 push-ups. I went through Parris Island during Vietnam War. I could never do more than 50. And to pass the physical fitness test, you only had to do 25. I'm sure you could do more than 50 push-ups. I mean, come on. Maybe. Yeah, we were talking yesterday about what the physical fitness standard should be, and if we can all agree that physical fitness standards in the military should not be lowered for women, then the question is, where should they be for everyone? I said 60 push-ups. I threw that out as a number. A lot of people seem to think that's a bit much. Is it, though? I mean, I guess it depends on how much time you have to do them. I'll put it this way. My 11-year-old son can do 20. Pretty decent form. I mean, his form starts to break down around 15, and he gets through to 20, but it's pretty good. So I really think that if you're going to join the military, you should have to beat my 11-year-old by more than 5 push-ups. I think that's, I don't know, seems that the bar should be set a little bit higher than that. Why are people always coming after people's jobs? This may be an unpopular opinion, but bad people should be allowed to have jobs. Like, do we all want to now pay the unemployment and government benefits of the now jobless person? I basically agree. This is part of the cancel culture, cancel campaign, which shows you, by the way, cancel culture, the term is not used as often these days as it used to be, but cancel culture, or whatever you want to call it, is not over. We still are very much living in it. And it just happened. I mean, what happened to that guy at the football game, that Eagles fan? That's what getting canceled is all about. And you could argue, well, he deserved it and all this. But yeah, that's cancel culture. It's when you've got gangs of people along with powerful institutions, particularly in the media, all like targeting one person and saying, we want to take this guy's job away and ruin his life. And again, maybe you'll say, well, he deserved it. But that's what canceling is. That's what cancel culture is, and it happened here. And I generally agree. I have a very high tolerance for campaigning to take someone's job away when they're in a government position and have proven themselves incompetent or unfit. Not just a high tolerance. It's, in that case, of course, you're trying to take their job away. That's one thing. For the private sector, I think the bar should be really high for trying to get somebody fired. Doesn't mean you never do it, but there should be a high bar. Taking someone's job away is serious. I think sometimes we tend to have a frivolous attitude about that, but this is their job. This is how they support themselves and their family. And that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that there's never a case where someone deserves to lose their job. Of course there is, but I think it should be a high bar. And in particular, if the offense they committed has nothing to do with their job. Now, I just saw there was a story about a woman who was a flight attendant at, I think it was a Southwest, I believe. Could be wrong. but I think it was a Southwest flight attendant, some major airline, who was a new hire. She had just started recently, and she made a video of herself twerking in a plane. There's an empty plane before it boarded, and she posted this dancing, twerking video, and people responded negatively to it, and then she got fired. Now, that to me is different. I have no moral conflict about that. Yeah, you should be fired for that. Because the offense you committed is directly related to your job. I don't want to board a plane when the people working the plane have been using it as a place to twerk. That's not, I want your sole focus to be on making sure that everyone has a comfortable and safe flight, not making TikTok videos where you're twerking. It's really extremely unprofessional, reflects very poorly on your employer, makes the customers uncomfortable, and so you should be fired for that. That's an easy call. But when someone does something that is not related to their job directly, then I think the bar is higher for trying to get them fired. But did this guy clear that bar? Probably. But I think we tend to be pretty cavalier about that, I think, in a way that I don't really like. Let's see, one more. There's a couple comments, actually several. This says, Matt made me cheer with his take on women in the military, then says Apocalypto is a perfect film, which shows Matt is running at 50-50 for stupid to great comments. Apocalypto, Matt has to be kidding. If that's a great film, how do you rate The Godfather, Casablanca, and Wizard of Oz? So there's actually, the Apocalypto hate comments were upsetting. I wasn't expecting any. I thought we could all agree, especially if you're the audience of a conservative podcast. I thought we were all on the same page here. Apocalypto is a great film. I'm blown away that some of you disagree, that some of you are so wrong about this. Yes, Apocalypto is a great film. The Godfather, I'd rate 10 out of 10. Greatest film ever made. That's easy. Casablanca, I haven't seen. Wizard of Oz, not a personal favorite, but it's obviously a legendary piece of cinema, an all-time classic. Apocalypto is better. It's a weird comparison to compare the two. They're very different films. But it's certainly one of the great films of this century, I think. And if you disagree, you're just wrong. And you're banned from the show. You're not allowed to listen anymore. Goodbye. Here's a reminder, the Daily Wire will be live from D.C. for the inauguration of Donald J. Trump as he's sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. And we're not just going to watch history, we're going to bring it to you live and uncensored. To celebrate the 47th President, we're giving you 47% off new Daily Wire Plus annual memberships. Plus, we're including a free $20 gift as a thank you for joining the fight. And remember, Daily Wire Plus is the only place where you get our daily shows ad-free and uncensored, plus unlimited access to premium entertainment, hit movies, and groundbreaking documentaries. Join the celebration. Use code 47 at dailywire.com/subscribe for 47% off your membership today. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. If you've been following Bill Burr's descent from edgy and countercultural comedian to full-on regime propagandist, you've probably been wondering when exactly his Howard Stern moment would come. Now, that's the moment where, as a comedian, Bill Burr completely drops the pretense of being an entertainer and embraces his role as a shill for the political establishment. We all knew that Burr was on this trajectory. It's been inevitable for some time, and now, beyond any doubt, that moment has arrived. Now, appropriately enough, Burr's Howard Stern moment came as he was speaking to another comedian turned propagandist, Jimmy Kimmel, on his show the other day. Kimmel begins by asking Burr about the LA fires, which forced Burr to evacuate his home. Watch.
Thanks. Very good to see you. I heard you had to evacuate your home.
Yes. Like most people, I had to. I got lucky, the winds moved, but, the fire was coming and all that stuff. So I feel lucky.
Are you guys back in?
And I think everybody did a great job.
Yeah.
Unlike the internet,
Yeah, right. I know. It's right.
Oh, my God. All of these fire experts. Why didn't you just fly a helicopter into the ocean? And then just, I don't know, because there was 100-knot winds? You want to do that? You want to do that at night, you lunatic?
How are you?
This was definitely mismanaged.
That's a big word we're hearing now.
Mismanaged, like some idiot on the internet knows how to manage the worst fire in LA, sitting there in his underwear. You know what? Looking at the footage on the internet, I have determined that this here was mismanaged.
So there's no real punchline there. There's no setup. There's no humor of any kind. It's just mocking the idea that normal people could possibly be qualified to judge or even notice outrageous incompetence in the leadership class. Even when that incompetence is burning down their city, Bill Burr thinks it's absurd for anyone on the internet to point that out. And this is a lecture that Burr is delivering after anonymous people on the internet have been proven again and again to be more reliable than the so-called experts on everything from COVID to Russian disinformation to January 6th, to gender, and so on. It's about as tone deaf and out of date as you can get, but to Bill Burr, I mean, this is the cutting edge of comedy. What's especially embarrassing about this is that if Burr actually cared about comedy and satire, there's a lot of material that he could be working with. It wouldn't make the political elites of Los Angeles very happy to hear it, but that's the whole point. For example, here's new reporting from Michael Schellenberger, quote, as fires raged and LA Mayor Karen Bass attended a cocktail party in Ghana, her deputy mayor for public safety was also unavailable because of an FBI raid at his house in connection to an investigation regarding a bomb threat that he allegedly made against City Hall. Now, I'll say that again. While the city was catching on fire, the mayor of Los Angeles was attending a cocktail party in Africa, a country she promised she'd stop visiting once she was elected mayor. And at the same time, the deputy mayor for public safety in Los Angeles was on leave following an FBI raid on his house related to a bomb threat that he allegedly made against City Hall. So nobody was paying attention to the fires because, the leadership in LA was either being investigated by the feds or in Africa. So it sounds like it's too absurd to be real, but it is. It's the kind of thing that actual comics could have a field day with. And of course, there were many more stories like this. There was Gavin Newsom telling the desperate woman that he was on the phone with Joe Biden, only to admit that he didn't actually have any cell service when she asked to see the phone. There was also the overweight lesbian fire chief who proudly stated that it's your fault if you get trapped in a fire, and so on and so on. But none of these comedic scenarios would play well on Reddit, so Bill Burr didn't bring any of them up. Instead, he attacked safer targets like Fox News and the insurance companies. Watch.
I love how all the chatter out there is about bands of illegal immigrants and homeless people lighting fires. They light fires every day. They're living outside. They're cold. And this theory that some homeless guy without a car went from Altadena all the way to the Pacific Palisades, and then we have a hang glider. And they're talking about looting. But CNN and Fox News are not going to bring up the insurance companies that are just going to keep everybody's premiums and still give themselves a bonus. Yeah. Yes. Free Luigi. I love how they acted surprised. Why did that happen? I have no idea. He wrote on the bullets why it happened.
So this is an attempt at humor that doesn't even make sense. He begins by acknowledging that homeless people and illegal migrants set fires all over the place all the time because, they want to stay warm. But then he says that it's totally absurd to conclude that these fires could have been set by homeless people or illegal immigrants because there was more than one fire in Los Angeles and they were far apart. Apparently, you're supposed to dismiss the possibility that there might be more than one homeless person or illegal alien setting fires in Los Angeles. And then you're supposed to laugh, I guess. Then everything somehow goes downhill from there. He starts talking about how the insurance companies are stealing premiums. Then he says that the psychotic trust fund kid who murdered a health insurance CEO should be freed because a lot of other psychopaths on the internet were saying that a month ago. This is comedy, you see. You're supposed to find this amusing. Now, again, the point of the humor here is to defend California's political elite. It was California's politicians who prevented insurance companies from setting higher rates for disaster coverage. So the insurance companies did the rational thing, which was to cancel a lot of policies for homes in Pacific Palisades because they predicted a devastating fire was likely to occur. And instead of doing anything with this information, city officials didn't make sure the reservoir was full. They didn't fully staff the fire department. Instead, they flew to Africa and called in bomb threats to City Hall. And yet Bill Burr won't make any kind of jokes about those city officials. He lets them off the hook entirely because those officials are Democrats. And Bill Burr is now a partisan hack. That's what he's devolved into. As I said, there have been signs that this would happen for several years. Back in 2019, for his Paper Tiger special, Burr went out of his way to defend the BLM narrative surrounding Colin Kaepernick, who, again, was maybe the single easiest target for mockery that you could imagine. But here's what Bill Burr did with it.
No, everything has just become absolutes in the States. It's nuts. Like that Colin Kaepernick guy, right? You knew when he was like protesting during the national anthem, no one was going to listen to what the he had to say, no matter how much he explained it. He goes, I'm taking a knee during the national anthem. This is a protest about police brutality, the way people of color are treated. We'd like to open a dialogue. He got about halfway through that. People are like, my brother's fighting in Iraq, you piece of shit. It's just like, buddy. Nobody is saying your brother isn't in Iraq fighting. You're not listening. This is about police brutality. My brother's a firefighter. He watched 9/11 on television. No, buddy. Nobody's saying that your brother's not a firefighter. I got a bone spur in my heel. I can still stand up during the dog. Buddy, nobody is saying you can't see a podiatrist. All right? You're not listening.
So this is a comedian who's basically promoting the leftist concept of centering. I mean, he did everything but actually use that phrase. Those racist, ignorant white people are always trying to center themselves, not listening to the plight of the multimillionaire quarterback. They don't care about the made-up fact that police officers are killing black people all the time. That's the joke. Hilarious. This is a routine that feels like it was intended for the faculty lounge at, say, Vassar, but Bill Burr apparently thought that he had a winner with this one. He said something similar on his podcast at the time, quote, for me personally, I'm a white male heterosexual. I can basically, within reason, do whatever the F I want to do. Here's a guy who's making zillions of effing dollars and still feels this way. This is, I should probably shut the F up and listen to what he has to say. That's your edgy, unwoke comedian there. In other words, it can't possibly be that the guy is rich and wrong about this, trying to stay relevant. That's not possible. No rich person would ever push a false racial narrative in exchange for fame and even more wealth. This is the kind of insight that Burr is now capable of. But the truth is that that's kind of underselling the decline of Bill Burr as a comedian. Even when he's not trying to make some grand political statement on behalf of the Democrat Party, he's still falling flat. A few months ago, he appeared on SNL and had several moments where the audience had no response, at all, to what he was saying. Kind of brutal. Watch.
I sat next to a shoeless cowboy on an airplane. Guy had no socks or shoes on the whole flight. The whole flight, I'm sitting there looking at his dirty Jesus feet, and all I'm thinking is the next pandemic is growing in the bottom of his feet, and all I'm going to be is the next, patient number 2, whatever the next disease is, So I'll tell you what kills me is I looked at the guy, and all I'm thinking is, you know what? God made that guy. And he keeps making that guy. Like one mouth-breathing moron after another. Yet we still go to church on Sunday, and what do? We praise him. When is the constructive criticism coming? Dude, when's the last time you made a Gandhi? Somebody empathetic,
Not particularly PC or woke or whatever. It's just lame. Just hard to watch. Hard to watch. I mean, if you go back and pull up clips of old Bill Burr routines from more than 10 years ago, it's like watching a completely different person. Yeah, he was actually a comedian, for one thing. He was funny. And he was even insightful in his own way at certain points. In 2010, for example, Burr did a special called Let It Go. It's worth watching if you find the time. One of the main themes of the special is that he's over 40 and still doesn't have kids. It's not some hour-long morality play about the importance of having kids or anything like that, but not that it would be wrong to talk about the importance of having kids, but it's a comedy, and it does wring out a lot of humor out of the situation in a kind of self-deprecating way. Certainly not lecturing anyone about how important it is to be loyal Democrat Party operatives. And he also threw in some material about the arbitrary nature of race politics and racial guilt, which was ahead of its time. So here's that part, just to give you an idea of what it's like.
I find a lot of that racial stuff fascinating. The different rules of who gets in trouble, who doesn't. I've noticed black people have the genius to put the curse word after they say the race of the person, where white dudes, we always put it in front. And if we would just make that little adjustment, we could save so many careers, so many jobs could be saved in the white community if we would just put it after. You never notice that in conversation? You hear a black guy being like, man, I was standing there, this Asian came in, he starts talking about, You don't even hear it. You're just sitting there, oh, what did this Asian do? I would love to hear the rest of this story, right? Dude, I would tell the exact same story, right? I'm standing there, right? This Asian comes in, right? Everybody's all like, whoa, whoa, hey, easy, Jesus, dude. What year is it, you know? It's like, dude, I just said what he said. I just preempted the that's all I did. He suggested he's hooking up with people's mothers. I'm not even doing that. It's just a quick, I got it out of the way.
So, now that's actually funny. And it points out the kind of arbitrary rules that we have for language and the way that we treat different races and all that. It's funny. It's a funny observation. And watching that clip, it's not hard to see that Bill Burr's downfall is even more tragic than Howard Stern. I mean, Howard Stern was always a freak, as we've discussed before. The guy was always just a disgusting creep. But Burr, at one point, had genuine talent. He wasn't going for the lowest common denominator, and he certainly wasn't running interference for some of the most incompetent politicians in the country, people who destroyed their own city while getting a lot of people killed in the process solely because of his political affiliation. But that's what he's been reduced to. And whatever you blame for his downfall, whether it's his age, the influence of his leftist wife, which a lot of people have pointed to as kind of the beginning of the end of him actually being funny, or you point to his politics or whatever, or the fact that he started starring in, movies and he was in Breaking Bad and these Hollywood things and started hanging out with people in Hollywood and going to the cocktail parties. I mean, all that stuff probably is part of it. But the inevitable conclusion is that Bill Burr is no longer a comedian. He's like Howard Stern, Jimmy Kimmel, so many other former comedians like them, now just a washed up political hack who's all too willing to read from a script that absolves his masters in the Democrat Party at every opportunity. And that is why Bill Burr, whose career began with a lot of promise and ended with a pitiful thud, is today, regrettably, canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Israel and Hamas agree to a ceasefire just days before President Trump takes office. Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi takes on Democrat senators. And TikTok might be banned in the U.S. on Sunday. Check it out on The Michael Knowles Show.